Stephen Pastis, Looking Up. Chapter 10. You say it's your birthday. Seeing Daniel so sad in that big empty house he didn't want to leave was more than I could take, and so I snapped out of the nervous haze I was in, determined to cheer him up, by taking him to the classiest place I knew. The Beefy Bee. The Beefy Bee was a graffiti-covered hamburger stand in a town that was now mostly kale and poke bowls, a grease-spattered loner. It was run by a man named Spiro, who we all just called Sparrow, whose burgers came with lettuce, pickles, and onions, and who, if you asked him to hold any of the three, would say, "No!" For Sparrow loathed special orders, and special people, and a special person was anyone who complained. And no complaints bothered him more than the ones about his exit policy, which was as follows. When you're done eating, you exit. Because Sparrow had other customers, and the minute you were done eating, you were no longer one of them. And so when you swallowed that last fry, Sparrow would swoop in, grab your wrappers, and cry, "Bye-bye now!" as he pushed you with his other hand toward the door. And I didn't want that to happen to me and Daniel. So I gathered up all the change I had left from my lemonade sales and bought Daniel a drink and the largest order of fries I could afford. And sitting outside at one of Sparrow's tables, I told Daniel everything I'd learned about what was happening to our town, most of which I had gleaned from the real estate brochure I'd found at old lady Trifaldi's house. And that was this. Your new town. Our town was being invaded by an army of people who were better dressed than us, better educated than us, and better at sipping lattes than us. In theory, they had jobs, but it was difficult to tell given the amount of time they spent sipping lattes. And yet somehow they had cash. Oodles of cash. Brought here under cover of a starless night in a convoy of money trucks, and all that loot tempted the poor people of our town like cheese to a mouse. Cheese. Tempted them to sell their houses, tempted them to move their families, tempted them to abandon our town. But can't they just refuse to sell? Asked Daniel. And say no to all that money? No chance, I explained. Adults love money even more than mice love cheese. Money, money, money. How sad, said Daniel. Yes, I answered, pleased he was finally grasping the depravity of the situation. And so I explained how, one by one, the places in this town were being bought up and replaced with things that were newer and shinier, with no regard for that which was lost. Like punches. So what do we do? Asked Daniel. We fight back. But did you say punches was already gone? Yes, but you and your house are still here, and I'm going to make sure you don't disappear on me too. But how? The first step is the signs. What signs? The ones they put in our yards. For sale. Like at my house? Right, they can't sell a place if no one knows it's for sale, so I've taken steps to at least slow that down. What kind of steps? I can't be specific at this time, but rest assured it's both legal and professional. Dumping them in creek. It was then that I noticed another crisis unfolding, for Daniel had finished his french fries, and if Sparrow noticed it, we would both be booted from the Beefy Bee, which would interrupt our strategy session at a critical juncture. Hang on, I told him. I need to get you more fries. Now. I could get them, he said. You're my guest, and a knight of the round table is nothing if not gracious. So I went back to the window and ordered more. $3, said Sparrow. And that's when I discovered I had no more money, which was a problem. Until I remembered the one courtesy that Sparrow extended to regular customers, and so I took advantage. Today is my birthday. Because going to the Beefy Bee on your birthday entitled you to one free item from the menu. Though it wasn't my birthday. Nor had it been on any of the other 6 times I had said so. And if that sounds like an easy way to get free food, it wasn't. Because before you got anything, you had to endure Sparrow's interrogation. You lying to Sparrow? He asked. I am not, I answered. Sparrow thinks you are lying. I'm not. Sparrow thinks you are. Sparrow is incorrect. Look at Sparrow. Then you would look at Sparrow, as he pondered your face, hoping to detect some measure of mendacity in the crinkle of your nose. And if he didn't crack, he'd give you the food. Now that might seem bad because it involves lying and all that, but if you want to know the truth, Sparrow knew I was lying, which I realized by the time I left, and he said, You aged like dog, 7 years in 1 year. And so I returned to the table and handed Daniel the fries. So what do we do next? He asked, shoving a handful of fries into his mouth. Get someone to remove the for sale sign from my yard? No, I answered. That just buys us time. This time, we need to go bigger. Bigger how? This time, we stop the sale. Chapter 11. The Leers of a Clown. Chuck Les Holmes was named for its 2 founders, Chuck and Les. And it was a name that, if you were driving fast enough down the highway and saw it on a billboard, looked an awful like the word Chuckles. And that made it sound less like a real estate office and more like a clown school. Hornhocking 101. An impression that was further reinforced by all the balloons and confetti on their sign. And it was their for sale signs that were invading our town. And so to combat them, we journeyed into the heart of the clown, where we sat down at the first desk we found, that of real estate agent James Baby Bellacci, who looked at me and said, That looks like it would be very hot to wear on your head. It was an unprovoked attack, and set an unnecessarily combative tone for the meeting. "I'm fine," I answered.
"Feel free to take it off if you want."
"I chooseth not."
"All righty then,"
he said, reaching toward a water cooler behind his desk to fill 2 small Dixie cups, which he then handed to both of us.
"Water?"
he asked. And I really did want it, sweating as I was, but then I realized I would have to take off my helmet to drink it. "I regretfully decline," I responded.
"I still want mine,"
said Daniel.
"And who are you?"
he replied, watching Daniel sip from his paper cup. "He's my associate," I answered for Daniel. "Daniel McGibbons, and we're here because he's decided not to sell his house."
"He owns a house?"
"Yes," I replied. "You see, James Baby Balachi, my associate here, has changed his mind regarding the sale."
"What's the address of the house?" he asked. "I'll look it up." 1547 Alcala, Daniel answered.
"Let's see now, 1547 Alcala," said the man, glancing at his computer screen.
"Ah, yes, charming fixer-upper."
"Thank you," Daniel replied.
"And you live there with your dad, Richard McGibbons?"
"Uncle," he said.
"But yes, I live with him."
"And he'd like to keep it that way, James Baby Balachi."
"You can just call me Jim," he said. "And by the way, what is your name?"
I paused, unprepared for the aggressive inquiry. "I don't feel comfortable disclosing that at the present time."
"All righty then,"
he said, staring at his computer screen.
"Well, Daniel, looks like we're out of luck here. The only name on the title is your uncle's, which means he's the only person with whom we can discuss all that. So if you don't want the house to be sold, your best bet is to talk to him."
Daniel looked at me, helpless. And seeing those eyes, I wanted nothing more than to strike James Baby Balachi with my lance. Kunk! But instead I said, "That won't be possible."
"You mean he can't talk to his uncle?"
"I mean, we'd like to settle this without his involvement."
"But he's the owner."
"Right," I said, winking.
"Do you have something in your eye?"
he asked. And that's when I put all the birthday money I'd been saving right on top of his desk. $4.55. "How about you pull some strings, James Baby Balachi?" He looked at the money, and then back at me. I winked again.
"I'm afraid I don't understand," he said.
"May I?" I asked, grabbing a sheet of paper from his desk and writing on it. "Chuck Les Holmes. Eberb."
"Eberb,"
he said as he read my note.
"I don't get it." "I think it spells bribe backwards," interjected Daniel, unaware of the legal ramifications of uttering the word out loud.
"Nope, nope, nope," I said, tearing the evidence into dozens of pieces and throwing them into the office carpet.
"Maybe it's time for you two to go," said
James Baby Balachi, who, as he rose from his chair, proved to be taller than I'd expected. And so I made myself taller by standing on his chair. And anticipating a joust, I knew the important thing was to strike first, and hard. "James Baby Balachi, our entire town is being overrun by a race of cookie-cutter foes who favor $5 lattes and hot stone massages, and who use their vast store of cheese to lure us from the sanctity of our homes, creaky, leaky homes that we love like an old teddy bear without arms, and from which we emerge each and every day, only to find more and more of your for-sale signs set there under cover of a starless night, by people with big trucks who value nothing so much as look-alike coffee chains. But our town is different, James Baby Balachi, and yes, Baby Muffin spits seeds, and Sparrow needs turnover, and Mrs. Trifaldi shouts curses, but the blood that runs through their veins is worth more than that of all those latte-sipping foes put together, for it is ours!" And suddenly infused with a nice sense of purpose, I grabbed him by his lapels. "So join us, James Baby Balachi! Say no to the latte sippers! Throw your body upon the gears of the machinery, and for once in the history of this balloon-festooned clown school, do something that is not in the service of cheese!" And there, with my hands still affixed to his lapels, James Baby Balachi looked at me with the soulful eyes of a convert, as his mouth mumbled, "I have no idea what you just said." And he turned to his secretary and whispered, "Will you please go get Karen?" And I turned to Daniel and said, "Run like your life depends on it."
"Why?"
he asked. "'Cause it does." Chapter 12. Drawing Conclusions.
"My leg is starting to hurt,"
Daniel said after we had fled halfway across town, him with a cane and me with a lance. "Let's duck into there," I said, pointing to the creek bed down the hill. "It's a good place for fugitives." And so we ran down to the dry creek, where Daniel saw for the first time what I had been doing with all the Chuck Les for sale signs.
"Did you do all this?"
Daniel asked. "For legal reasons, I'll have to deny that. But yes, this is clearly where someone is throwing them."
"So why'd we have to run out of his office like that?"
"We had no choice."
"But why?" he asked.
"Because."
"Because why?"
And I don't know whether I was drained from the battle of Chuck Les or just plain hungry, but either way I did something a knight should never do. I snapped at my Daniel in distress. "You know, I'm sorry, but I'm doing all this to help you, and you just sit there. Like at the Beefy Bee scarfing down those birthday fries, or at that real estate office where you drank from your Dixie cup while I did everything I could to try to save you. You, who in all the time you've lived across the street from me have never once crossed that street to meet the girl who was staring out her window in the hope that you would pay some attention to her. But you never did, until now, when you're scared about your situation, which, if you ask me, is just a wee bit selfish. So, you know what, Daniel McGibbons? Maybe you should start answering questions?" And as soon as I'd said it, I wanted to sink into a deep, murky bog. Because the thing about being a knight is that you're supposed to endure everything gracefully, be it arrows, armies, or plague. And here I got a rumbly in my tumbly and snapped. And to make matters worse, Daniel didn't snap back. Instead, he just looked at me with that big brown face, and I swear it was everything I could do not to wrap my arms around his wonderful head. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "You're sorry?" I answered. "I'm the one who has to apologize. I may be the worst knight ever. Feel free to fling me from a catapult back to whatever castle I came from. I deserve this!" And for the first time ever, I heard Daniel giggle. And it was just about the cutest thing I'd ever heard. And so that made me giggle too. "I need to draw that someday," he said. "You flying through the air like that." "I'd like to see that," I replied. "Just don't make my hair all smooshed from the helmet. Also, you should know that it's very hard to capture my essence." And with that, Daniel suddenly began to talk. And so I listened. "When my uncle took me in, it was kind of weird because I didn't really know him. I mean, he was my mom's brother and all, but I don't think they were close. So we never visited him or anything, and all I really knew was that he was a travel writer or something, and that's why he's gone so much. And as much as I wanted to ask about what had happened to his father and mother, I could tell he didn't want to talk about it. Ditto his need for a cane, though I suspected the two things were related. And so I'm home by myself a lot. I mean, sometimes I have a babysitter, but I'm mostly alone during the day." And I wasn't about to interrupt, but part of me was tempted to say how silly it was that he was alone all the time, while I was right there across the street and would really have enjoyed his company! But instead I said nothing. "I guess it is a little strange being alone that much," he continued, "but it's not like my uncle doesn't take care of me. Like, if he's going to come home late, he leaves me dinner in the fridge, so it's not like I don't have food and stuff. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to complain. He's just busy. And he didn't have to take me in, and if he hadn't, who knows what would have happened to me. I probably would have been shipped to some home for bad kids or something." "Home for bad kids?" "I don't think that's a thing," I told him. "How do you know?" Because I'd already be there. Which seemed to convince him. "I just really want to draw," he said. "I don't care much about anything else." "Does he draw with you?" "My uncle?" "Yeah. No, we don't really do much together." "Why not?" "I don't know if he would care very much about the things I like." "Like your drawing and all that?" "Imaginative stuff. I don't know. I just like thinking up new characters and stories. Plus, when I draw at home, I feel like the world can't get me." And that's the thing about Daniel. Just when you think he's going to clam up and not say another word, he goes and says something like that. "What does that mean?" I asked. "You know, bad stuff, bad things. I'm safe where I draw. That's why I don't want to move." "You draw in your bedroom?" He shook his head. "Different room." "Can I see it one day?" "Maybe. I don't know. I don't really show it to anyone else." "But don't you get lonely in there? You can't meet other people like that." "Like who?" "Like me." Which right after I said it, I wished I hadn't, because the first time we met, I pilfered his piñata. "Right," he said. "I suppose. But every new person you meet is someone the world can one day take away." And then I didn't know what to say, because on one hand, it was my knightly duty to make him feel better, but on the other hand, I agreed. And I wanted to tell him my theory about how all the people who have left you were somehow together at this big party, the one you can't attend, and how it's really pathetic. But it didn't feel like the moment for that. "Sorry I never came out of my house and said hi to you," he mumbled with his head down. "You don't have to apologize, Daniel." He looked up at me. "Is it okay if I ask you something?" "Sure," I answered. Because it would have been pretty darn hypocritical if I had said no after all that. "Who was the woman that guy was asking for?" "What guy?" "The guy at the real estate office. He asked for some woman named Karen." "Oh, I think she probably runs the place." "The real estate office that's selling all our homes and stuff?" "Right. How do you know that?" he asked. Then I thought about all the things I could have said in response, like, "I'm just guessing," or "seems logical," or "I don't remember him even asking for anyone." But if I was going to have any chance of saving Daniel at all, I would first have to be honest. And so I was. "She's my mother."